friends. I'm your host, Dr. Dave Layton, and thank you for joining me in our journey to hope. It is my desire through this podcast to bring you information about how to discover, sustain, or perhaps regain hope. In this episode, I'm joined with Devon Hewlett and her husband, Paul. I'll let them introduce themselves. We're going to discuss her journey to hope as she was diagnosed with breast cancer, but I'm very excited to have her husband, Paul. I teased him just a little bit while we were discussing that I was more interested in Paul than Devon, but that's not true. I love them both. I'm very, very happy to have them. Well, hello, Devon, and hello, Paul.
Hello.
Hello.
All right. Well, before we get to my questions, please tell our audience a little bit about yourselves and your family.
My name is Devon Hewlett, and Paul, my husband, and I live in Anchorage, Alaska. We've been married for 16 years, and we have two daughters. Today, one is 11, and the other one is 9.
And this is Paul Hewlett, Devon's husband. On top of the 2 children we also have 2 dogs, 2 bearded dragons, and 2 leopard geckos.
Well, it is great to have you guys, and I appreciate it so much. So you're in Alaska, and you have 2 daughters. You said, what were their ages again?
Ren is 11 years old, and June is 9.
11 and 9. Those are some magical ages.
Agreed.
Challenging times. I understand that. Yeah, I invited you guys on this podcast to chat just a bit about the journey to hope. That really both of you went on, and so many times folks don't realize that it is in the category of a journey to hope, but it is. And so I want to just talk a bit about your fight with cancer, some of the things you experienced from both of your perspectives. And by the way, I cannot express enough my deep, deep, heartfelt thanks for you being there for our daughter Natalie during her fight. When I was going through my journey early on, when I first started my treatment schedule at the cancer center, a volunteer made a statement to me that actually became part of the title of my book, Journey to Hope. She said, "No one walks alone." And that meant so much to me. It was a great expression. So anyway, thank you for walking with Natalie. And to a large extent, you walked with us as well, because we were very well aware of what was going on. Okay, so I guess, Devon, starting out with you, tell us a bit about how you felt when it was diagnosed.
Yeah, my cancer story is somewhat interesting because I was diagnosed with breast cancer in 2017, but my connection with breast cancer began 10 years earlier. I worked for an organization that put together an event to raise awareness for breast cancer, and our first one, it was annual, our first one was in 2007. And so for almost 10 years, I worked directly with cancer nonprofit organizations as well as patients, taking everything from their testimonies to making sure that we were getting their information out to the public. We raised $100,000 our very first event and continued to do something around that for almost 10 years. The cancer groups taught me that we're educating, we're advocating, and we're supporting. So there was some irony when I did get the call that my pathology report came back in 2017 and I had breast cancer.
Okay.
I knew quite a bit. I was already, maybe not about the treatment, but I knew enough to know what was headed my way. Initial reaction, I think, for all people who get that call or talk to a doctor in person is panic. You begin to live in somebody else's life almost. You live watching yourself for, I don't know, maybe a week or two as you start to find out what the treatment plan is. You begin to realize that you have a year, well, for me, it was a year of treatment and surgeries. And it was, you panic. I was told to stay off the internet. Um, and I mean, you really evaluate what is most important to you right after a diagnosis.
Yeah, life got very real very quick. I I didn't feel panic, but I tell people there was an element of fear there. Absolutely. You said you worked with that organization, and thank you for that. I'm sure uh, there's a lot of people that benefited from that directly, but it was different. Now, all of a sudden, you had a whole different perspective on that from what you knew intellectually to now you were experiencing. Yeah. And that's just a natural thing. Paul, what do you think, my friend?
I think as a caregiver standpoint, when she found out, you almost go into shutdown. Like you can't show emotion because you're uh, what I was trained in life was that I'm not supposed to be weak. I'm supposed to be strong. And
Right,
so
right.
that's me. I'm supposed to be that pillar and that crutch for her. However, I went to my office like the following day and broke down and started crying in a room full of grown men because I could be weak there, which
Okay,
is not,
right.
stereotypical. But yeah, I think you almost shut down and go numb because you can't let yourself feel anything so that you are on top of it,
Man, I,
so to
I
speak.
appreciate you sharing that. I can understand how you felt. Wow. And that's why caregivers are so important. When I am working at the volunteer, as a volunteer, when we get the caregivers in there, almost always there is a caregiver. I tell them, you are so incredibly important to us. And I take care of them at the cancer center as much as the patient because, and sometimes, sometimes the patient's been there more often than the caregiver, and the caregiver is going to have a lot of questions and concerns. And so we do take care of them as well. So you had that kind of numbness, bewilderment, fear, Paul, those kind of things.
Yeah, the fear was there for sure. It just internalized it all.
Yeah. But you had that idea, wait a minute, I got to be strong for Devon.
Yeah,
Yeah, that was a challenge. I don't mean it because you're not a strong person, but I'm sensing from what you said that you almost felt like you had to put your feelings aside to take care of what she might be feeling.
absolutely. But not only that, our two little girls at the time.
Oh, that's right. Okay, thank you for that. That's right. Well, seriously, wow. We all like to think we're going to be strong and we can handle this and we got it, either as a patient or a caregiver, and all of a sudden it gets real. So I know how you two felt. Talk to me a little bit about your family's reaction. What did the children were quite young, but they
Yeah.
still had to deal with something.
Yeah, exactly. One of the things that Paula and I really connected on at the very beginning of my diagnosis was how will we tell Ren and June? So we had a 3-year-old and a 6-year-old. So essentially preschool and kindergarten, and was very it was very planned. We sat them down and explained it to them, and we decided that we would be really honest and that we would tell them what was actually happening. So using the right terms and making sure they understood so that we weren't lying to them about anything.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, we call that age appropriate.
Yes.
Yeah.
And, it's not that we were careful on how we were talking to them about stuff, not to scare them, but to help them understand that life would be very different
Yeah.
for a year. I think our 6-year-old became much more compassionate to people. And our youngest one, I think it made her more affectionate because she knew something was off and she could only express that through her hugs and love and being cuddled.
So Paul, you had to be dad and mom sometimes both during that time.
Yeah, very much so.
How did you feel adapting to that new challenge?
Devin and I have always been really good at emergency situations. Like we our fight or flight definitely isn't to run away. It's to fight and do what we need to get through a situation. But what we don't think about is during that situation, even though I had both the kids with me still, it was really lonely. Like, because I didn't have that same partnership and companionship with Devon as I did, because a lot of times she was so sick that she was resting in bed and sleeping, or so there would be times where if I needed that, I'd go just sit in the bed by her.
Devon, so you were on a regimen of chemo
Mhm.
and then, well, of course, during your hospital stay, you had other activities and everything. But, we talk about in the cancer community chemo brain. And, sometimes it's goofy, sometimes it's frustrating and aggravating because my biggest thing was I couldn't get the right words out, or I'd just sit there in a fog. Did you experience some of that? How did you deal with that? Now I'm asking that from the perspective of um, it was my wife and I at home. We don't have our children at home anymore, but you had children at home that still needed you. Can you address that just a little bit?
Chemo brain is definitely a real thing. It does put you in a position where you end up staring off, or you can only focus on one thing at a time. Multitasking is not an option. Paul was a single parent. I created activities for me to be able to do with them, but they didn't last more than maybe 30 minutes or an hour. So that I could spend time with them, but also get the rest I needed. And it was difficult to watch them give me help or compassion or what do you need, mom? How can I help you, mom? It was a brand new relationship that I had with my daughters because they needed their mom, but they also understood they had to step up and they had to um, be cautious about being loud or, not wrestling with mom, or Paul did a lot of that stuff on his own. Mine was more the cuddling and reading books and watching TV.
Hey, I'm sensing something here. You two grew together closer through this.
Oh, so the statistic for marriage during cancer, 1 out of 5 marriages don't make it.
Yeah.
And I had already seen some of that in my years before, and Paul and I were determined that
Okay.
that's not where we were headed.
Okay.
This couldn't have been a better thing for us as a couple and as Christians. And um, I think we are much more in tune to each other now than we would have ever been before.
Well, we hope we grow that way together without having to experience this kind of a tremendous upsetting event. Thank you for that. And Paul, I appreciate you, brother. I really, truly appreciate you. I am passionate about what I call Ephesians fathers, where the Apostle Paul writes in Ephesians, we're to love our wives, and he gives a whole bit of information about. I know it wasn't all walking through sunflowers and green meadows, challenges are there, but you stuck through it. You made that determination. Thank you. And so yeah, there were challenges to the family, but you overcame them. You stuck together. That's great. One of the things I had to learn was to let people do things for me. I've always been the guy in charge. Now all of a sudden, I've got a big dose of humility that I'm learning about. I'm one of these guys that I try to be independent, but all of a sudden, I can't even go to the bathroom by myself. I got to have help, and that's okay. That's what people are there for and care for us. Yeah, we
Boy,
all
that
experience.
couldn't be more true. You learn to surrender during your treatment as the patient. And I think you also, I don't know, I shouldn't talk for Paul, but I saw him accept help from a variety of different people.
Yeah,
Yeah, whether it was the kids had to get to school and I had a work meeting, so grandma and grandpa took them to school for me, or Devon's sister, or just coming home, or having the kids come home from school and knowing I've got a freezer full of food and a fridge because people are regularly bringing food for us so I can throw it in the oven and still spend time with them and help Devon. I mean,
yeah.
and all kinds of aspects of help.
Yeah. Well, and that's the people are there and they want to help us. Uh, we just have to turn loose and let them. I had to learn that, and I did, and grew to love a lot of people. And so all of that's there. Part of the reason I'm bringing that out is, again, none of us are walking alone. There's people out there. And so we should not feel we're walking alone, and we should not try to walk alone. Okay. Well, let's talk about some of the highs and lows. What's something that was a really high point? Let's start with that.
Ooh, for for me,
And
the
let me
high.
ask, I'm
Sure.
sorry.
Yeah,
I
go
wanted
ahead.
to, well, can you remember something that was just laugh out loud funny?
I think being a patient after surgery, you really do have to have help. And I can remember Paul and I laughing because I needed help getting dressed. I needed help going to the bathroom. And you couldn't really do anything else but laugh at yourselves where you never thought you would be as a married couple. Um,
Everything you had to do for a newborn baby, I was doing for my
Okay.
wife.
Okay. I had
um,
I had a I had a guest on earlier in the week, and she said that when her husband was helping her, she thought, you didn't sign on for this. And then she says, but then I stopped and said, well, yes, you did. So, all right.
yes,
So, okay.
sickness and in health really means something
Yeah,
now.
it got real quick. Okay. So, yeah, let's talk about highs and lows. What was a high day?
In 2018, we had an event here in Alaska called Making Strides for Breast Cancer. It's an American Cancer Society event. And we did a walk, and I had probably 20 people from the job that I had worked at previously, plus friends and family, come just for me. And I remember thinking, this is my way to thank everyone. It was incredibly emotional. One of our walkers is a photographer, and he took pictures of all of us together, and it just meant the world to us. And we raised money, but it was more about me getting to reconnect with these people who had loved
That's
me
right.
and supported me.
And so you knew you were not alone.
While I knew I wasn't alone through most of the process, I think having an event just focused on that really opened my eyes and said, okay, you've got this. You have all these lovely people here for you.
Yep. Okay, good. All right. Y'all are looking at each other or nodding at each other.
No, I would say that was an extremely big thing because we've done that walk before, not as a caregiver and a
Patient.
patient, but as supporters, and now we were in different shoes. And I've got another story. I worked at a machine shop at the time doing sales, and it was very much a hands-on job, but my company allowed me to work from home so that I could care for Devon and the girls. And I remember getting a email with a photo of like 30 of my cohorts, and they had all shaved their head and were holding up a banner for Devon
Wow.
saying that they supported us and that they were there for us. And that was pretty emotional because some of those guys I never would have imagined cared enough to do that. And so,
Wow. That is incredible.
yeah,
Wow. I have never heard of such a thing. That's,
yeah.
man, that's awesome. I can see where that's a high. Absolutely. Well, I hate to touch on the lows because that's the other side of the coin. You know, there were, as I said, it wasn't always walking through those green valleys. There were low times. Yeah.
The low parts, I think, for most cancer patients is the longer that you're on chemo, the harder it gets to recover. And you get a steroid shot that makes you feel amazing.
Yeah.
And then not much longer after that, you feel completely drained. And the
Yes.
day before, I don't know if you did this, but the day before chemo, I would look at Paul and be like, I don't want to go today. I'm going to stay home. And he was like, no, you have to go. Yeah, I think the other low part may have been before the double mastectomy that I had. The surgery was 6.5 months after or 6.5 months after I was diagnosed. So I had already gone through the 6 treatments of chemo. And it was something I tried not to think about because I knew that I had something bigger to get through first. But that week before the mastectomy, I was so emotional because you're already tired
Yeah.
and knowing that you're going to have to recover from surgery and one that's incredibly emotional because,
Sure.
you know,
Sure.
they take
Yeah.
everything when they go in. And the recovery, I wasn't prepared for that. I just mentally was not there. My body was weak. Paul had taken care of me for so long, and we knew we were facing something new that might be just as hard, or not harder, I guess.
I'd say one of the lowest points, and I think this would be for anyone who has any kind of extensive medical treatment, is sitting in the room by yourself with medical providers calling you for money or looking at the stacks of bills that keep rolling in, and then
Yeah.
having Devon laying down trying to nap in the other room just listen to me talk to these people
Okay.
because all they care about is when they're going to get paid, when they're going to get
Yeah.
their money for,
You seem to have gotten through it, and that's great, or are
yeah.
working through it. That's good. Okay. Let me go in another train of thought. I am in that window of time right now, 2 years out from when everything started with me, that during this January and February timeframe is when all of the initial events occurred. When I first started receiving symptoms, the first time I saw a doctor, the day I was entered into all of those things are happening in January and February. So uh, I was I was very, very surprised that at the first anniversary, I was having post-traumatic stress syndrome. Those memories were flooding in. I was having nightmares. And I talked to my doctor about it, and he said, well, of course you are. And but that was something that I was not prepared for. So my question then is, how do you feel on those anniversary times?
That's a good question because I'm still doing treatment to some extent. I'm still taking medication and I'm still seeing a breast surgeon. And so mine isn't so much on the anniversary as it is every time I go to the doctor. I guess it was my oncologist that told me it's called white coat syndrome. So what happens is my
Wait,
blood
would you say
pressure.
that again?
Sure. I
It
was
was,
talking to Yeah, I was talking to my oncologist about my anxiety before all of my doctor's appointments in the last 6 years, and my heart rate goes up and my blood pressure will spike, and I can feel myself feeling sick. And she told me it's called white coat syndrome. So
white
it's,
white coat.
yeah, white
Okay,
coat syndrome, like a doctor would wear a white coat.
sure.
And it's continued. At first, I made Paul go with me to the appointments because I just had a difficult time interacting in the place that I got treatment, at the place that they told me I had cancer, at whatever it was. And over the last year and a half, I've been able to do it by myself. But it's pretty much any doctor at this point. And I think it's that PTSD of hearing, I'm sorry to tell you this, Devon, but you have stage 3 breast cancer.
Okay.
No matter what we're there to talk about, whether it's my blood pressure or whether it's an echo, it didn't really matter. It was like it replayed. And I'm still trying to overcome it today.
The other emotion that I experienced that I was not prepared for, didn't think about, was survivor's guilt. I felt that and was surprised at that. And again, I talked to my doctor about that, and I appreciated my doctor. He said, God's not through with you yet, but I still felt it. And I feel it to some extent now because I interact with folks at church who have lost a loved one. And so I have to meter or temper my joy a little bit. Anyway, you're nodding your head, so you kind of understand that.
Yeah, I think whenever you've been diagnosed with something that you may or may not survive, you tend to have compassion for other people who are either going through it or the supporting people. I notice our conversations, Paul and I, when we're talking to people who have been diagnosed or who have any kind of terminal illness, it's changed. It's much more calm. You do pull back some of the joy of your own survival and you think about what it is that they would need or what you would have needed at the time.
Yeah.
And instead of sharing your story necessarily.
My daughter Natalie mentioned in her podcast how she grew to understand that everybody has something that's going on, and it's not any less or any more. It's something they've got going on. And I think I came to realize that as well. And it's real for them. Absolutely.
Definitely. Everybody has such a different story. Sharing my story with Natalie was such a comfort, and her support for me as a close friend, I don't know that it would have been the same if she hadn't been going through it at the same time. And I listened to her podcast and I cried through the whole thing because I remember exactly what all those things felt like with her, the
Yeah.
phone calls.
I chuckled because she and I shared a few tears too.
Yeah, very emotional. It was not the same cancer. It wasn't the same situation. It didn't matter. The emotions were all very similar.
Yeah. And by the way, I know absolutely that Natalie's going to be listening to this, so you go ahead and do a shout out for her.
Natalie, I don't know what I would have done without you. And you were the high part of everything I went through.
Hey, my goal is to make Natalie cry, so.
Well, I can tell you, if I was home alone with Devon while she was resting, if I was in the other room and I heard her laugh, I absolutely knew without a doubt it's because Natalie sent her something via text that that they were sharing, which was personal or just off the wall crazy.
Yeah. Well, and again, Natalie was there for me, but more, she was there for Mom, and that was just incredible. I'm gonna start crying. Stop it. Well, the last question I have, and you've discussed it a little bit, is our outlook on things changes.
Well, I would say from a caregiver's standpoint, and Devon being my best friend, something that stuck with me from her doctor's appointments was that they told me she got it so young that being the kind of cancer she got, it can always resurface. So there's always this dark cloud in the back of my mind that says she's going in for another doctor's appointment. Is this when that other shoe's going to drop? On the other hand, it's made me realize that the present is very important. Don't waste it. Live it to the fullest. Make sure I hug on her and kiss on her all I can and smother her. And
Yeah.
I think that's part of the closeness that we grew from going through this was we were already very affectionate people, and it just magnified that on a much more personal level, especially with our kids.
Okay. Thank you for sharing that, Paul. The guest that I mentioned that I talked with earlier in the week, and she'll probably listen to this as well. She has a podcast called Test Those Breasts. And, yeah.
I like it.
Yeah. You can go out and find that on the podcast outlets, but Jamie is her name. And I was looking through different podcasts, just, kind of getting an idea about things. And I saw that and I said, okay, this is going to be interesting. And this was. But she's a strong advocate for early detection. And, you don't try to muscle your way through it. You pay attention to what's going on. You do what is supposed to be done. I had made the statement. I used to work with healthcare professionals developing their education and curriculum programs and for nursing students, things like that. And when I retired, the nurses said they were going to make me an honorary nurse. All I had to do was pass my NCLEX and do some clinicals, and I'm good to go. And I told him, I said, look, no, I will not be a nurse, but I will be the best patient you ever had. So, again, I never realized I'd be on that side of everything. So I deeply appreciated the healthcare professionals. And that's what I want to end on. Talk to me and go ahead and express how you want to your appreciation for those people, and not just the professional folks, but the other folks as well.
I think that when we started our cancer events in 2007, I didn't realize what I was getting into and how it was going to affect me over the next 10 years. But when I was on, like you said, the other side of it, and you're looking and going, I'm the patient, and I know all these resources and I know where to go, it meant the absolute world to me. I received emails and text messages of people saying, I'm ready. You just tell me what you need. The American Cancer Society, I knew those people, and they reached out to me and said, what do you need? Let's get it going. There was no hesitation. I think oncology nurses might be the most amazing people in the world.
Isn't that? Yes. And I know.
It's such a, yeah. I
I
don't know how
just,
they do it,
yeah.
but somehow they make you feel like you can do this. And they're calm and they're loving. And when you see them each week, it actually looks like they're happy to see you, regardless of the fact that you don't want to be there. um, and, I had doctors for a variety of things. My breast surgeon was the most amazing lady, and she took such good care of me. And the staff that she put in her office who saw me during treatment understood and never pushed me and never made me feel like I was being silly for hurting or needing help. The breast surgeon sent me over to a plastic surgeon because I did have to have extra surgery after the mastectomy. And she was one of the most amazing ladies. She let me cry in her office. She didn't tease me for, complaining. I didn't want to have all that stuff done. And she knew that it was going to be an emotional decision and it was going to be an emotional surgery. And it was, and she was lovely. But I think it might be those people who you didn't expect to come and put their arm around you and tell you that they're praying for you. It might even be the person you worked with that you didn't know cared so much that they were spending $100 a month on food so that you wouldn't have to cook. It's the person at church that knew you didn't feel good and you had a fever and put their arm around you and let you cry. And maybe it's the Natalie that sends you stupid memes about unicorns or whatever else to make you laugh because you just needed something not about cancer.
You mentioned about the oncology nurses. I have the joy of working with the nurses now that took care of me. And I remember one particular morning, my nurse was late because of terrible traffic out on the interstate, and I was late, and we got there, and then the EKG machines wouldn't work. She went through two of them before she finally got to the third one that worked, and she just took it in stride, like, yeah, another day. And I told her later, I said, Brentley, you just don't get to have a bad day, do you? And she said, oh, no, Mr. Layton. If we have a bad day, you have a bad day. And but I get to see these nurses all the time, and they must screen them. That's just who they are. They are just such compassionate people. Not just them. I mean, the volunteers, the
Yes.
lady at the desk that smiled at me, the lady that cleans the room, the man who took the menu came in and said, here's the menu for today, but what would you really like, Anyway, I'm talking too much. So I know what you're saying, though. The people that you did not expect and you just cannot help but love them and appreciate them. Anything else you guys want to share?
I mean, when it comes to hope, because I know that was your focus, I feel like cancer is a lifetime partner. But what makes it so special for us as Christians is that we know that our hope is in heaven and we don't belong here. And so when things are low, for Paul and I, it's agreeing that don't sweat the small stuff because this isn't where we're going to end up. We have a promise from our God who tells us that we're going to have heaven. And I think it really puts into it puts a priority for us in our family. But I think also it's reminded us to be more present in everything that we do, every moment.
I so appreciate you saying that, because I do tell people there is hope in this life. The true and lasting, everlasting hope is found in our Lord. And yeah, we got this. As his children, we've got it. So I appreciate you saying that. But thank you, because there's so many people out there that are facing the challenge. All right. Well, I'm going to go ahead and wrap up. Devon and Paul, thank you so much for uh, being there for each other and being a guest of this podcast. There'll be folks listening to you, and I can tell you already they're going to feel better having listened to you.
Well, thanks for having us on.
Glad to be here.
Okay. Well, friends, thank you for joining me as together we journey to hope. I truly hope that we have encouraged you to discover, sustain, or regain hope through this effort. I invite you to contact me if you have any questions or comments, or if you wish to share something you've experienced in your journey to hope. My email is ourjourneytohope@gmail.com. That's ourjourney and the number 2, hope@gmail.com. And please share this podcast with someone whose hope is being challenged. I look forward to sharing more with you soon. Again, Devon and Paul, thank you for being my guests. I'm Dr. Dave Layton, and thank you for listening. And until our next episode, remember, we give all glory to God our Father.